Interview with Mr. Harold D. Erdrich on 27 February 2001, Freeport, Long Island Armory. Interviewer is Lieutenant Colonel Robert von Hasselm, and videographer is Mr. Michael Akey. Mr. Erdrich, tell me, where and when were you born?
In the Bronx, New York, August 7th, 1919.
And is that where you grew up?
Yes, until about 8 years old, approximately, and then we moved to Brooklyn.
To Brooklyn?
Right.
Why'd you move to Brooklyn?
Oh, I don't know. I don't recall my father, what the reasons were. He was a salesman in the costume jewelry field, I recall. He also and my mother were college graduates.
Mm-hmm.
May I continue?
Sure.
My mother was a concert pianist, and my father played the violin, and I started taking lessons on the violin when I was about 8 or 9, and I played it all through high school. I was in orchestras and bands, and I also, one time, my mother said to me, "Harold, we're going down to the city to take an audition." And I said, okay, and I went with my violin, and it turned out to be the Horn and Hardt's Children Hour on 57th Street somewhere on Madison Avenue, and I played Ave Maria on the violin, and I was a good singer, and I sang Just a Gigolo, which was a Russ Columbo song.
Sure.
And then they had me on the show on a given day, I don't recall, it may have been a Sunday, and that was it. I never was on it again. But I played the violin until through high school, and I enjoyed it very much. And I played with my mother and father, just for our own pleasure. She unfortunately couldn't play after a while because she had arthritis in the hands, and that finished her playing. But she was a superb piano player. I worked at 11 years old. When the Depression hit, I was 10 years old. My father couldn't do anything in the field he was in. He was in the costume jewelry field. And he asked me one day, do I want to sell ice cream with him? Sure, and I was 11 years old, and we went to the east side of Manhattan, Ludlow and Stanton Street, I remember this so vividly, and picked up a pushcart from a store there, and they had a box which they put bricks of ice cream in with dry ice, and we pushed it all the way down to Division Street, and you make a right on Division, you take that street over to the West Side Highway. Mm-hmm. And we sold ice cream to the ferry lines at Cortlandt Street and Rector Street. There were ferries that used to run to New Jersey at that time. And we sold ice cream, made some money, and when the summer came, my father stopped doing it, but I did it myself. I picked up that pushcart and pushed it, and I made money and came back and paid for the ice cream and gave my mother the rest of the money, and maybe I had 4 quarters in my pocket, you know. But that's what I did for a number of years in public school. Then I stopped, and I was working for grocery stores after school and weekends and holidays and things like that. Mm-hmm. And then I was interested in the printing field because I met my wife, and her father, this gentleman I was talking about, was the composing room superintendent of the Journal American and the Mirror newspapers. That's the department that puts the paper together. Mm-hmm. Linotype, Ludlow machines, and makeups, all the pages, and that's what I eventually became. But I got my union card in Connecticut. I worked in Hamden, Connecticut. This is before the war, mm-hmm. Which is a suburb of New Haven. I worked for a typographic shop, and for 5 days a week, and we were married. And no, we weren't married. No, we weren't married yet. That's another story. And I came home Friday night. I didn't have a car. I came home by train into Manhattan and then subway, and I was living with my folks in Brooklyn which wasn't far from where my future wife lived, just two short blocks away. I have a story I could tell you about something that had to do with the end of the war, World War II, that involved my family.
Sure.
We were the first boatload of soldiers to be sent back from the European theater. Coming from southern Germany, because after I was in 4 invasions, 5 invasions. The first invasion was a practice invasion near Casablanca in Africa, after we had left Newport News with a tremendous fleet of boats. And then we got back on the boats and we headed towards Greece and Crete. Middle of the night, they turned around and headed back, and we invaded Sicily. After Sicily, we had 2 invasions in Italy, and then we invaded on the Riviera by Saint-Tropez, France. We went up France, about the middle, made a right turn, crossed the Rhine River, and headed south. That's why I'm coming to the southern, what happened going back when the war was nearly over. We're returning to go to Le Havre, France. And the colonel says to me, I was a good friend with the colonel, David Meyerson was his name. And I was in the 2nd Chemical Mortar Battalion, big mortar, 4.2 mortar, 26-pound shell. He says, I was a staff sergeant at that point. He says, Harold, he says, let's go up that road. I know where we are, Colonel. I said, I know where we are. I knew what was ahead of us. He said, take 2 of the boys. I says, the road was like this, dirt. I says, we have to, I said, I know what you have to do, he said. Took out our bayonets, and we crawled on our stomachs, probing the ground for mines. There were no mines. The German soldiers, whoever there had gone, they were gone already. We got up to the gate, and we probed the gate for booby traps or whatever. We watched the trees, snipers, nothing there. Opened the gate and went in, and we saw a lone figure standing way across a big open field. Coming out of the woods was a train which was not moving, open boxcars. And then we looked, we didn't see that figure anymore. He must have seen us, and then he left. So I said, let's go over to the train, fellas. Went over to the train, and as we approached the train, there were dead bodies on the ground. I said, let's climb up and see. We had seen this before. In Turkheim, Germany, while going south chasing the Nazis who were trying to escape into the Alps. We were given that job because the shelling of targets was over by then, you know. So we climbed up, and the boxcars were loaded to the top with dead bodies. Children, women, men, old, all ages. Then one of the fellows went back and waved to the colonel, and they came in with all the vehicles and everything, and following us. And they saw all this, and then we went into the concentration camp, and there weren't too many people there, a couple of hundred, and they were in pretty bad shape. There were no Germans at all. On the other side of the field, where we saw that lone figure standing, there were 3 houses, nice houses, well, like a football field away. And when our outfit came in, we saw 3 people starting to walk towards us, dressed in civilian clothes, a man, 2 men and a woman. I had taken German in high school, and I took a refresher course at Fort Bragg, where I was put into this outfit from basic training in Fort McClellan, Alabama. And I could get along in German. I wasn't fluent, but I could question prisoners of war, and I did that many times. So I questioned these people, and they had nothing to say, and the colonel said to me in English, and maybe these people understood English, because I didn't see them again. He said, they may be understanding everything we say. I said, that's very possible. But he wanted me to ask them, did they work in the concentration camp? Oh, no. So what happened with them later, because behind us would be coming the outfit who was going to take care of doing all that work, the grave registration work and everything. On one side of the camp, we were searching and looking, the whole outfit. There was a big trench cut, dug out, 40 feet wide, a couple of 100 feet long, loaded with dead bodies. And they had poured some chemical on them. But we didn't stay long. When the other outfit came in, we packed up and we continued our trip back to the boat. We got on the boat in Le Havre, France, just us, one single boat of soldiers, 3,000 approximately. And going back to the war itself, we always supported the infantry. I'll get to that in a little while. We took the boat and we thought we were going to New York, because we were a bunch of New Yorkers also. We went to the Commonwealth Pier in Boston. We pull into the dock and tie up this troop ship, and we're all ready to get off. A train comes into the pier. The train wasn't there yet, but there were train tracks, 2 sets of them, and that's what the officers told us. The train's going to come in, and we're going to get into that train, go to Camp Miles Standish for a day or two, and then go to Fort Dix, where we were drafted into, and be sent home and discharged. We're standing near the gangplank, me and my friends, and over the amplifying system, they're calling me. Hey, what's that? The fellow said, what do they want you for, Harold? I don't know. Go to the captain's office, captain of the boat. I did. I asked sailors how to get there, and they told me. Knocked on the door, come in. The captain is sitting behind his desk, and there's a civilian and a colonel from the Army standing there. And the captain says to me, Sergeant, you can go with these 2 gentlemen. They're going to take you off the boat. They're going to take you down to the end of the pier, and then you'll come right back. It won't take but a few minutes. Anything wrong, Captain? No, everything is fine. You have my permission to do this? Go ahead and do it. I did, and you can imagine my friends screaming, where are you going? I don't know, I'll be right back. We go to the pier, we go up a flight of steps, cross a little landing, down a flight of steps. The colonel opens up the door, and there's my wife and father-in-law. When she got a letter from me that I sent from France, that we're going to Le Havre, France, and I don't know the dates and everything, but we're coming home, she gave it to her father, and he went to work with the Hearst management and the Boston American newspaper in Boston, and with the pull that they had, they called him to come up, and they arranged to have me taken off the boat. Unbelievable.
So where did you go?
So we kissed and hugged, and then I had to go back.
Oh.
And walked up the gangplank and said goodbye to the colonel and the civilian. The civilian was a reporter from the Boston American newspaper. And I don't know if the story made the paper or not. I never heard about it after that. But I came up the gangplank, and all the fellows were screaming, and the colonel had told me, please, Sergeant, don't tell your friends yet. After we're gone, you can say anything you want. So after they were gone, I told the boys and the officers. It was quite a thing. It was quite a thing. But I just wanted to tell that story about what I was discussing.
Well, let's go back a bit. You graduated high school in Brooklyn?
High school, James Madison High School in Brooklyn. And I started to go to night college, the Brooklyn College at night. And I was working I was working days selling printing, and no, sir, excuse me. I was working in the grocery store, and I drove a taxi on the weekend. And I did that for a year or two. But I had to stop college because I couldn't keep my eyes open. I was sleeping in the class every single night. So the teachers and professors said, Harold Erdrich, you may as well quit it. You're not getting nothing out of this. You're not going to pass the tests. So I stopped.
What part of Brooklyn were you living in?
East 24th Street and Avenue Z.
Flatbush?
No, Sheepshead Bay.
Sheepshead Bay.
Sheepshead Bay. In an apartment. We never had a house with my mother and father.
Now, do you remember when you first heard about Pearl Harbor, what you were doing?
Oh, yes. I was at my future wife's house, and I was going to eat there. They lived on East First Street and Avenue West. I lived on Van Sicklen Street and Avenue West, just 2 blocks the other side of McDonald Avenue. We had a train and a trolley car. I hear about Pearl Harbor, and I end up going home later, and I say to my mother and father, I'm going to go down to Whitehall Street tomorrow morning and enlist. They tried to talk me out of it, but I'm going. I'm going to do it. I'm going. I went down, I took the physical, I passed everything, 20/20 vision. I took the colorblind test, and I flunked. I was colorblind. I didn't believe it. I said, doctor, come, we'll take the test again. You know the test. Little colors.
Yep.
See a letter and a number. I called them all wrong. All wrong. So I didn't become a flyer. 2 months later, I was drafted. February 10th, I was drafted. When I got to Fort Bragg, I took the whole test again. Flunked. I couldn't be a pilot. I was on the list to go to officer candidate school when we got the alert that we couldn't because we were frozen, our outfit. We didn't know it, but we suspected we were due to go overseas. My wife and I are talking over the phone and letters, and we decide to get married. We weren't married yet. And I asked the captain, he says, okay, you can go home next weekend, because the weekend after we have to go on mountain maneuvers in Virginia. That's just what happened. I called up, and her folks and my folks, they made a wedding, and you know Brooklyn at all? Granada Hotel on Flatbush Avenue. They had a penthouse and a ballroom up there, and that's where the wedding took place. I took the train from Fayetteville, North Carolina on a Friday evening into Penn Station and went home to my mother and father on the subway because I had to see them. And then in the morning, Saturday, went down to Court Street and got our marriage license, my wife and I. And we were married Sunday in Granada Hotel there. After the wedding, had about 100 and some odd people there. And we went back to Penn Station, Florence and I, and we both went back to Fort Bragg. We got a room, and then I had to go 5 o'clock in the morning back to camp for Reveille Monday. So I was with her Monday night and Tuesday night, and Wednesday morning the colonel told me, we're going on mountain maneuvers Friday. You better send your wife home tomorrow, meaning Wednesday. That's what I had to do. I went in, told her, you got to go, Flo. We went on mountain maneuvers, then we went to Newport News and got on the boats, and we went to Northern Africa for a practice invasion. That was October. We were married October 25th, 1942. And I was discharged September 45. So I was in the service a little over 3 years.
Now tell me about the your unit, the 2nd Chemical Mortar. Was Battalion?
Right. When we were put into that battalion, we fellows said, chemicals, they're never going to use gas. We're not going to go anywhere. We'll probably be in the United States for the whole war. Then we found out that it wasn't such a thing at all. Those shells held high explosive or smoke. There were 4 companies of mortars, A, B, C, and D, and I was in the headquarters company. We were liaison between the mortar companies, helped them, and then I was given the job because they found out that I had won medals for running in public school and high school. I had won medals. I was a fast runner. In high school, I was on the track team with Marty Glickman, who broke the 100-yard dash, the city record, and I was on the team with him, but I was a year and a half behind him. I knew him, but I didn't know him well. So when the Army, in my records, saw this, I had it in the record, they teamed me up with an officer, and we were target spotters. We were always with the infantry, right behind the infantry, with them practically. If they saw a target ahead, they'd send somebody back to tell us. We had a telephone, no radios. Radios weren't even invented then to be used like that. I had a telephone with a wire, with a spool of wire on my back. So I had my helmet, my rifle, 2 pistols, hand grenades, extra ammunition in my pack, and the telephone, and the other end of the wire was at the gun position. If we'd see a target, and of course I had a map, a chart, and didn't have to open it up like that. I had to just fold it to the area and just keep changing it, you know. And we'd give them code numbers that had been arranged before, what coordinates we were at and where the target may be. And then we'd say G, just in case somebody was tapping the line. G was go, and they'd fire 1 shell. The shell had powder rings on the back and a shotgun cartridge in the back, so that when it comes down, the firing pin hits the shotgun shell and it explodes, and off goes the shell, and the powder rings give the distance that the shell will go. That's basically the raw explanation for that. And of course, the tip of the shell is primed, so when the tip hits, boom. We had a fabulous weapon and nobody even knew it till we started to use it. We used it in Sicily. We supported many divisions, 36th Division, 45th Division, airborne. We were in the 3rd Army, 7th Army. I saw Patton, General Patton, a number of times. He didn't know my name, but he would come traveling around, shake hands. I would do this target spotting with an officer. I would climb trees, bombed out churches and buildings, hills, wherever we could get and not get shot by a sniper or something like that. And we'd really relay the information back to the gun position. Very successful with the targets and the damage that we did to the German army.
Now, who were you normally assigned to? Was it an infantry company, or you would be attached to?
I was attached to the headquarters company
Yep.
with the 2nd Chemical Mortar Battalion.
Right, but when you were doing the target spotting duty, you'd be attached to, you'd be with an infantry company or battalion?
A company, which is part of a battalion. I have 2 books here. 2nd Chemical Mortar Battalion. David Meyerson, the colonel, he was the 2nd colonel. The 1st colonel we had that started with the outfit from the States was Robert Breeks. The word break with an S, pronounced breaks. And then after Sicily and a little of Italy, he was gone. They switched him or whatever. And then Colonel Meyerson came on the scene. And Colonel Meyerson was a native of Texas and a West Point graduate. And he had been in some very secret action that we never knew about, but he had been in something. We didn't know what it was. He was a very brave man. I used to go with him in Italy and France and Germany. Just me and him. I drove the Jeep, and two fellas, and we had a 30 caliber or 50 caliber machine gun mounted there, and the colonel was sitting next to me, and he wanted to go investigate something. We go down roads, and twice we came in on a German patrol that was on the road, also with a vehicle. They quickly jumped out of the vehicle and ran like hell. We didn't even go up to their vehicles because we didn't know what they had around, you know. So we just raced back, reported it, and the mortars sent some orders over in that direction.
Now, you said that many of the guys in the unit were from New York.
Oh yes, New York and New Jersey.
Any particular reason why? Or?
No, just the drafting process, I suppose. And we all were sent to basic training in Alabama from Fort Dix. And we were, well, some of them did not go with us to Fort Bragg, and some did go. May I tell you something about Sicily?
Sure.
We were the first wave on all the invasions. They made an attempt to fire a mortar from a boat, but it really didn't work. The movement of the ocean could have caused the shell to go up instead of that way, and we'd be in our own danger. So they never tried that. We landed in Sicily, and there wasn't much problem. The infantry, and of course all our planes and the aircraft carriers and all the shelling had chased the enemy north. We had a Father Francis O'Brien, a chaplain, who was assigned to our battalion from the Bronx. He and I were good friends. After the second day, he said to me, I was a corporal then, he said, can you get two of the fellas and I'll get a Jeep, and the colonel gave me permission to ask you, and I have to go investigate something ahead of us here. Not far as we know. The night before, there had been an awful lot of aircraft activity over us. And the LSTs and the whole fleet of boats that had anti-aircraft guns were shooting. We didn't see anything. We were huddled down in our foxholes trying to stay alive, you know. So the chaplain and I and two of the fellows in the Jeep, and he told me, get one of the Italian fellows, and the fellow Lou DeMasi, D-E-M-A-S-I, from the Bronx. He's a friend of mine. He spoke very good Italian. He came along, and we went up this road and that road, and we see a farmhouse. We pull over, there's two women, they heard the Jeep coming out, and a few small children, and Lou questioned them. The chaplain told them to ask, did you see any airplanes here last night? Anything crash? Yes, she pointed. We went and we found it. It was an open field plus an olive grove. There was an American paratrooper plane, all burnt. Everyone was killed. I would say, I'm not sure of the figure. This information is probably available. You could find it if you had to. I'm taking a guess, but I thought it was about 47 crewmen and 3, the pilot, a assistant pilot, and maybe a navigator. That was the crew. We see this, and the chaplain says, Father O'Brien says to us, fellas, we all have to get all the dog tags off the bodies and bring them back. I said, well, what's going to happen with our outfit? They're going to be going forward. We'll catch up with them. So we start on the dog tags. That took us the better part of that day. And then I had to ask the question, Father, we have to bury them? Yes, we have to bury them. We dug 50 graves in sandy, hard ground. He had asked me tell everybody to bring their shovels. I didn't even think of it, you know? Why? That was the reason. We just didn't dig the graves. Father O'Brien and we dug the graves. We were just full of blood, sweat. We finally got the job done. It took us 3 days to do that. We got back in the Jeep. We went back to the farmhouse. We had our own rations, so we had something to eat. And we had water in our canteens. And he had brought some extra water because he knew what we were going to go run into. Went back to the farmhouse. We kept them away from us. We just used their well and we cleaned up as good we can. We got back. We went all the way to Palermo, Sicily. By the time I got there, I had a high fever and I was shaking. I had malaria. The other fellows didn't get malaria. I got malaria. There was a big hospital ship in the port, anchored out in Palermo. They took me out to it. I was there 4 days. Father O'Brien, the rest of the fellows went to where the outfit was. I didn't know where they were. 4 days, I was fine. They let me off the boat, took me ashore. There was an information little building to go to. I found out where the outfit was, and a truck took me and other fellows. They were in Messina, the other end of Italy. They found out where my outfit was, near the water somewhere. Found them, and the boys, wow, you're here. You came back just in time, Harold. Yeah, why? We're invading Italy tomorrow. Absolutely the truth, what I'm telling you. 100%. Mm-hmm. And we invaded Salerno. The second invasion was Anzio.
Mm-hmm. So tell me about Salerno.
Salerno was very terrible. We could hardly get ashore. Infantry was pinned down a mile up the beach. The Germans, the Italian soldiers were very few. And then after Salerno, the Italian army surrendered. They were out of it. Mm-hmm. Strictly the Germans we were against. So they maybe thought it was going to be an easy invasion, but it wasn't. So the aircraft carriers and the warships, they shelled like the devil and strafed and bombed, and then we were able to get ashore and put the mortars into operation.
Do you remember what actually happened to you on that day in Salerno? I mean, what was going on? What did you feel about? What were you thinking about? What were you doing?
We were dug in. We dug, and it was earth. It wasn't a beach. There was a beach, but it was earth. We dug in. I don't think we moved from there for at least a day or more. Then, of course, we got the mortar companies ashore with all the mortars and all the ammunition. And the mortars, the base plate of the mortar with the barrel was on a two-wheel carrier. You put that on, and of course trucks were used to bring the shells, because there were 2 shells to a wooden box. That was 52 pounds, 53 pounds to lift up. But then the mortars went into action, and I think we were with the 36th Division, and these 2 books here will give that information if I'm guessing wrong. Mm-hmm. It's all pinpointed in here. And you're welcome to have them, and then you can always just return them to me in the future. It's okay.
Great.
We went, then we invaded Anzio. We were at the Rapido River for quite a tussle. We were at the Abbey of Monte Cassino. We were at the bottom of the mountain, and there's the Abbey up on top. Germans had gone into it, And of course, they had dug in front of the abbey as you come down the mountain. It wasn't really a high mountain, but it was high enough. The infantry, the airplanes strafing and bombing, and oh, brother. And our mortars, well, 4 companies of mortars shooting shells. Then at one point we heard there was going to be a big aircraft group coming over, and they bombed the monastery. It was unbelievable. We could see the bombs coming down, and the monastery was a tremendous structure. And as the bombs hit, big tremendous chunks came down the hill. So whatever Germans were there, they skedaddled. Otherwise they'd have been crushed or something, you know? They were gone. The monastery was pretty much destroyed, because we were able to advance then, and we went up the hill and everything, and all of us, all the outfits that were around there, and there was nothing in the monastery that was worth waiting for or fussing about, you know? So we just kept going.
What did you think of the bombing? I mean, did you feel like any reservations about us bombing a monastery, or?
No, we did not, Colonel, no, we did not. By that time, we were resigned to the fact that we're going to be in this until the end. I certainly understood that this mortar was an unbelievable weapon, and they're not going to stop using it. We went to Rome, and the advance on Rome, the Germans just retreated, that's all. We got into Rome, we were there a few days. We were all allowed to visit St. Peter's and the Vatican. And the Pope had come out, I remember. Then we went past Rome and we went towards Florence, Italy. The same thing. We weren't in too much action because everything was moving fast. So we were moving fast too. Sometimes we supported tank outfits. They were advancing, and they used the mortars to shell ahead of the tanks. We got through Florence, and we were in a rest area, and we were advised that we're going to the coast, and we're going to prepare to invade another invasion. They didn't say southern France. So we said, well, where are we going to go? To Corsica or Sardinia? Those are those 2 big islands there. No, we didn't. We bypassed that. We went to southern France.
Let's hold there for a second, because we're going to have to change tapes.
Because I have something.
Good. Tape 2, interview with Mr. Harold D. Erdrich on 27 February 2001. Harold, we were talking about, you were just about up to the invasion of southern France.
Yes. The invasion was not troublesome at all. As we got ashore on the beach, there were, and started to move inward, there were some German and American boys who had been killed. We remember seeing them.
Mm-hmm.
In Italy, after Florence, there was talk of preparing a glider landing in southern France, where they'd bring in the mortars and us in the gliders. Planes would pick us up at an airport, you know, and wow, that was unbelievable, you know. Never came to be, because they found the airplanes that they sent out to photograph. The Germans had put up barricades on fields, wires and poles and all that. Whatever fields were near any major arteries, major roads or towns, couldn't land, so they forgot it, they didn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
We went up France, and that was a fast trip. until we got to Metz. And there was a lot of resistance there. So we did a lot of target spotting there. And then the Germans headed towards the Rhine River. So we did the same in pursuit, and we crossed. We crossed in pontoon boats. And then they put up a pontoon bridge after that to get vehicles across.
Mhm.
But we got across on foot. Then we headed south, doing the same thing, same target spotting through different towns, and our mortars, of course, also contributed to the destroying of some parts of towns, churches, other industrial buildings possibly as we went.
Mhm.
We never questioned what it was, but we reached a city called Turkheim, Turkheim, and we got in there. The German soldiers themselves had left the area, and there was a labor camp there, and we were directed to it, and we found it, and it was a barbed wire prison camp, and we found in there a good few hundred young Polish fellas and girls from Poland. They had been taken there from Poland to that place, and they were used in the village, in the town, as domestics, as doing work for the people in whatever businesses they had, cleaning and all that. And the United States Army and other outfits that had entered after us, all these people was set free, but not to just go wherever they wanted. They couldn't go. They had to stay there. A young fella came to me when we were eating with a lot of these young people. Some of them could speak a little English. And this fellow says to me, "Oh, hello." He says, "New York." I said, "Do you have family in New York?" "Yes." Gives me a piece of paper. My apologies, maybe I could find out the name, but I don't have it now. It was an uncle of his who had a little clothing store on 6th Avenue between 43rd Street and 46th Street, on the south side of the street. I said to him, as well as I could, because I spoke a little German, so maybe he understood a little German, that I would try to get this paper to his family there. When I came home, about a week or two after, I said to my father, "You want to go with me there? We'll go there?" "Sure." We went, we got off the 6th Avenue subway, right there, walked along, and there's a clothing store. We went in, the man comes over, middle-aged man, maybe, no more than 50. I give him the paper. I don't have my Army uniform on. I had kept it on for a few weeks, but I had switched. He looks at it, he looks at me. I says, "This is your nephew?" "Yes." That was his nephew. I said, "I can't tell you anything about him. We told him what to do, and all the people that came after were going to help him, and I said, if you are able to bring him here, he said, that's what he's going to try to do. I did give him the name of something in the government to contact. Oh, it must have been 2 years. He calls. My nephew is here. He's working in the store. I went with my wife and walked in, and there he is. Speaking a little English already. That happened. Absolutely.
Great story.
Unbelievable. All we did was cry.
Well,
So that was the gist of my adventure in World War II. Just let me say this, I was awarded the Bronze Star Medal. And I have papers on that in case you need it. Colonel Meyerson, after I was awarded the Bronze Star Medal, said to me, I've also recommended you for the Silver Star. I said, Colonel, I knew what he was talking about. I said, Colonel, all the fellows were with me there. I didn't do all of that myself. We helped a mortar position bring them ammunition while we were under fire, and thank God we all didn't get hurt. I never got wounded in the Army, in the war, but I got hit by shrapnel once in a while from shelling or bombings. Once we were in a railroad station in Germany, and we were bombed by a German plane. And I didn't get hurt badly, but just like a scrape, like a Band-Aid, some Curacum with a Band-Aid, and that was all. So I never got a Purple Heart. I never applied for a Purple Heart. And that is about my story.
good. Let me ask you a couple of questions.
Sure.
Well, first of all, let's complete the story here. What happened after you came home? What happened to you after the war?
Okay. I went back. I had gone to printing school before the war, and I went back to printing school, and I was taking hand type, setting hand type. And then after that, I went to Mergenthaler Linotype School for a linotype course. But I never used the linotype when I worked. I didn't do that. I became what you call a makeup man, a compositor. And then I was working in printing shops, two in Brooklyn, one in Manhattan, getting experience. One for 3 months, one for 6 months, one for another 6 months. And then my father-in-law said he heard of an opportunity through the Connecticut Union, and the two fellows up there were dear friends of his. They were president of the union up there. They knew of a shop in Hamden, Connecticut, called Southern New England Typographic. And I called them. And they said, yes, they're looking for makeup men, compositors, night work only, no days. I said, can I come up and see you? Sure. I didn't drive up, I didn't have a car then. My father-in-law had a car, he wanted to loan it to me, but I'll take the train, I'll take the train. I saw them, they hired me. I went out in the shop and they gave me something to do and I did it. You know, I wasn't super qualified, but I could do it. I went back and I was at the start the following Monday, and before I went back, I told them I have to come up here and get a room. They knew of a few boarding places they gave me, and I went and I found a very nice room in somebody's house. And I had access to their kitchen and bathrooms. It was very nice, and shower. So I had a place to live. I went home, and then I came back on Sunday afternoon, and I was up there 5 days a week. No Saturday and Sunday. Friday evening after work, I went home. I worked there for nearly a year. Then I heard of another opportunity in South Norwalk, Connecticut. much closer. I could travel back and forth every day to that, with a car, of course. So that turned out to be a shop. Oh. It was called, oh, C.J. O'Brien. I'm sure of that. Just like Father O'Brien from the war. And they were in South Norwalk, and they did newspapers, and they also did Moody's Index, a financial thing that they did. And I worked nights, 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. The first night I started to work, the foreman gives you your work, you know, you take it back to your table where you are. I have access to get linotype slugs done, and the Ludlow is the bigger type, which I do myself. I knew how to do that, you see. And put the jobs together, so to speak, on a small tray. Then bring it to the foreman. Well, no, then I take a proof of it on the proof press and bring the proof and the job to the foreman. He checks it, makes sure there's no errors, fine, and he gives me the next job. That's the way you work in a typographic shop. I worked there, and the first night, after I did a few jobs, a middle-aged man comes over to me, one of the men who did the work too, and he says, young fella, why are you working so fast? I said, well, this is the work. I go to the foreman, he gives me the job, and I do it. Then I understood what he was getting at, because he said, slow down. I said, sir, this is how I do it, and this is how I will continue to do it. So I never bothered with him again. I was working too fast. I was getting too many jobs done.
Now, did you eventually got back to working in New York City?
Yes, yes. I worked for Fairchild Publications on East 12th Street in Manhattan, nights also. I never worked there steadily, at a steady job. I was an extra. I would show up whenever I wanted to at 6 o'clock. And the foreman would put you on because he always needed men. And I got $2 more for that night. That was a union rule, a union contract thing. The foreman of that department was a Mr. New, N-E-U, who knew my father-in-law, because they used to have meetings of all the superintendents every month, of all the newspapers and the big publications in New York. So Mr. New knew my father-in-law. One point after there, a couple of weeks, Mr. New calls me over and says, I understand you work during the day. I said, yes, I'm selling printing. He said, when you break up the work, see, after we did the work, I mean, from 6 to 10 p.m., they check it all, and if it's all acceptable, we break up the copy. We throw all the leads into the tub to melt it down again, you see? And then we set up for the work that we're going to do after that, from 11 o'clock to 2 in the morning. So Mr. New said to me, when you've finished breaking up and it's all approved, just look at me and I'll go like this and you can go home. And that's what I did. I didn't do it every night, but it was a little break. I was able to get an extra hour or two of sleep before I got up and I went out knocking on doors to sell.
Did you have any children?
Yes, we had 2 boys. We lived in Wantor first. First, I could have gotten a house in Levittown on a rental basis, $60 a month, and we didn't want it. We went there, but we decided no. We were looking for something better. I was starting to do okay. And we found a split level in Wantor, which was brand new. They were just going to build a house. There was a model there. The house would be up in a couple of months. And we took that house and came home and told my mother-in-law, my mother and father, and then my mother-in-law and father-in-law. And my father-in-law says to me, again, gentlemen, this is a true story. He says, can we move in with you? I looked at him. You want to move into the house with us? With Mom, his wife? How are we going to get to the Journal? We're going to be out in Wanto, and now you're in Brooklyn. And they lived in a Van de Veer Estates, an apartment project. I'll manage. I got plenty of men out in Ireland who work out there. I'll have plenty of rides. And you're going to be going in. You have to work too in your business. I was in business on Mott Street then, 262 Mott Street, right off Houston Street. I said, okay, you can join us. And they did. We gave them the bedroom. We took the garage, we made into a bedroom, which was perfect because we kept our cars outside. We didn't put our cars in the garage, you know. We were using them so much. They were with us 3-4 years, and the Journal American, the Hearst papers, decided to put a stock page in the Journal. They never had a stock page, like the Times and the Tribune. And they put it in, and the pressure on my father-in-law was so great, and he was a smoker, and he was a drinker. And one night, I hear noise, I jump up, it's him. He could hardly breathe. I got him up, I opened up the window, I held him out. They called the ambulance. And the ambulance came, took him to the ambulance, and I went with the ambulance. Before we even got to, it was Meadowbrook Hospital called then, one on Hempstead Turnpike. He was gone. It was a shame. He was like a second father to me. Wonderful man. Wonderful man. Before that, may I talk about the business I got into?
Well, actually, I'd like to, we're running out of tape. So what I want to do is I want to come back and ask you a couple of questions on World War II.
Absolutely.
Okay. You'd said that the 4-point Deuce was a fabulous weapon. Why did you think it was?
Because it was a big shell that caused a big explosion when it hit, and the gun position could be quite close to the target and still shoot a weapon a couple of 100 yards if it had to. When I interrogated German prisoners of war, and some of them were not just privates, they were majors and captains, I asked them the name of their outfit. That's the kind of information I had to get from them. Their rank, the name of their outfit, where were they heading, you know, if they were willing to give us information. But these fellas were always telling us about the weapon that you use. What is that weapon? We told them. Big mortar. In fact, they even saw it. You know, they said that weapon beat us. That weapon took over the whole thing. The small mortars were no big problem, because they had small mortars too, the Germans. But that big mortar was the terror weapon.
Mm-hmm. That really seemed to shake them up, huh?
I don't know if that weapon is still involved in the Army. I have no idea.
We still use 4.2.
I wouldn't doubt it. Yeah, sure.
Now, did you ever have any experiences with any of the Allied soldiers in Italy? I mean, from the other armies, British, Polish?
Oh yes. We were attached, and they were attached to us. Australian, New Zealand, British. Once we had from Africa French Goumiers, big, tall, black fellas, all big guys. And they were attached to us, and they had guns, but they worked with their knives. They didn't use a gun. Mm-hmm. They were attached to us. They were more interested in seeing how the mortar, they want to know about the mortars. Because I think the plan was to give the mortars to the French. You know, what French army was still from Africa were coming in to chase the Germans also. But that's what,
Any other particular interesting characteristics of different nationalities stick out? About the Poles, or the Greeks, or the British?
yeah, well, we couldn't converse too well with some of them. We couldn't make ourselves understood. We only could really understand German, because I spoke a little bit, and Italian. But I had taken French in school, but I couldn't converse in French. I could say, you know, a couple of words, that's about all.
What was it like? Now, you're from young man from Brooklyn, and you're in Rome, at the Vatican. That must have been something. I mean, how did you feel being in Rome?
Excellent. I went into more churches with fellows from my company and the officers for different holidays, wherever we happened to be. I went into more churches than possibly many people who go regularly to church in that span of 2.5, 3 years. In fact, I went into churches here with the boys in Alabama. They were going to church. Harold, you want to come? I said, of course I'll go. Of course. And I had no problem. It was great. They were very appreciative, and I was appreciative.
Do you ever think, as a young man in Brooklyn, that someday you'd be in Italy, in Rome, you know?
Nope, nope. About 10 years ago, then or more approximately, my accountant and his wife, and I and my wife, went to Italy. I had first up wanted to go. Another man who is my, wait, let me get it straight, my daughter-in-law's father, Jerry Kaufman, was a teacher of languages and a principal of a high school. He had been taking groups of students, seniors, in their last year to Spain, Russia, and Italy. I missed the Russian trip, but I made the Spanish trip with him. He took about 20, 25 students, and he always needed a few parents who would volunteer to go. And my wife and I offered to go, so we could help out. And so we saw Spain, Madrid. We went to a ranch in the Costa del Sol. We went to Alhambra. We didn't go to Barcelona because we were only there about a week, that's all, you know, a week.
Well, how did you feel about being back in Italy again?
I remembered it, and I was a tour guide, really, because I knew where to go, so to speak. I remembered it would be nice to see the Vatican and St. Peter's. In France, no, I never went to France. I went there myself. I went to the Versailles and the Louvre. We went in Florence when we went with my accountant and his wife and my wife. Part of the tour we landed in Venice. We started in Venice, came down to Florence, Rome, Naples, Sorrento. That was the tour. I had been in all of those places. So the Florence trip, just a day, was the museums and the art galleries were just unbelievable. We saw paintings from Goya and Michelangelo and all that kind of stuff. Sorrento, I had been in Pompeii as a soldier when Mount Vesuvius erupted. And the ash coming down, eventually it was that high in the streets and on the farms and everything. I was there when this happened. And we went back to it when we made the personal trip, and of course it was all cleaned up, it was gone. But we ended the trip in Sorrento before we went back to the airport to fly home. And that was very lovely, because we had been in there also.
Now, two last questions. We've got a couple of minutes left. One, what is it you didn't like about Levittown?
Nothing, we liked it. But we wanted a bigger house with a nice room for a patio and so on and so forth. That's why we didn't take the Levitt house.
Okay. In the last couple of minutes we have here, is there anything you wanted to add? Anything that really strikes you about your experiences during World War II, or something that you'd like to sum up with?
Well, I felt I was most lucky, wouldn't be the exact word, but appreciative that I survived World War II, and I went through plenty, and we were able to help the infantry, which was that's what our job was, to support them and help them. And we were successful in doing that, and we fellas felt we played a good part in helping, defeat the enemy.
Thank you.
You have that?
Yep.